Hello, welcome back to the third and final video in the series. My name is Adam. I'm putting a link to a video in the description box below to another video in this series, kind of like an alternate one, that helps you to gain performance out of your sim depending on the type of aircraft you'll be flying. It's called the Orbex versus Mega Scenery, and go check that video out and it will help you gain performance out of your sim, and it'll also teach you about the scenery order, which we're going to touch on a little in this video, but that video will fully explain it, so go check it out. Right, in this third final video, we are going to talk about maintaining your computer. We're going to talk about maintaining your flight simulator. We're going to talk about what happens about patches and updates to add-ons, or even the simulator itself. It's going to talk a little bit about how the flying, in the simulator, takes place, and about what utilities there are, what sort of resources there are available to you, both offline and online. And this is more of just an expansion on your simulator now, and getting to know what community and events are available. Okay, that's basically it. In the previous video, we talked about the hardware side of the simulator. What computer are you required to have? What kind of simulator did you want to build? And is it going to be a home cockpit build, or is it going to be a desktop simulator build? So in this video, you've built your sim, you've built your computer, or you've bought your computer, and you've got your cockpit up and running. Now, what do you do? Well, first off, I just want to talk about the power of your computer. Because no matter what simulator you're running, be it P3D or X-Plane, although from now on we're going to talk about P3D, just simply because I use P3D, but X-Plane is near enough identical to what we're going to be talking about here. We're talking about the power of your computer. Okay, so there are certain specifications really you want to your computer to have in order to run your simulator plus your cockpit successfully. And in the last video I said you want to be getting the best of everything, and don't worry about the price. If you can't afford it, then you just save up for it, and then you buy it, and little bit by little bit until you can afford to purchase it. And that is so true. That is the one major secret really in having the smoothest performance in either simulator. Talking specifically about the software of Windows now. I used to run Windows 7, and I found that the flight simulators ran better with Windows 7 than they did with Windows 10, and I believe it's for a couple of reasons really. I believe that Windows 10 has extra utilities and extra processes running in the background that will basically slow your speed of your processor down. A processor does many calculations a second, especially when you're running your sim. It does millions of calculations every second, and the faster your CPU speed, the more gigahertz you have to play with, the more calculations it can effectively do in a quicker time. Now, if Windows, the operating system, is then on top of that simulator and asking your PC to be doing extra calculations, well, that takes the power away from your simulator. So understanding how your operating system is affecting your simulator is one big key in gaining performance out of your sim, which goes into what we're going to be talking about, which is maintaining your sim and maintaining your PC. So Windows 7, as I said, doesn't have like the Cortina installed into it. It's something that you can activate and disable at will. You can also disable Windows Update without having to go into like the core of the computer to do it. It's fairly easy. Whereas Windows 10, they've prevented you from doing that. You have to go into the core of your computer in order to disable it, and even then it's a short-term thing. Obviously, computers are designed nowadays to continually receive updates, and in order to have your computer running at optimum performance, the Windows PC wants to continually update to guard against attacks, either through like the internet or through software you might be putting in, or anything really. It might not be security cyber attacks it's updating against. It could be just a simple update because there were some bugs found and they want to fix it. But the one thing I found is that these updates that keep coming in do have a side effect on the simulator. And unfortunately, you can't run your simulator offline. You know, if you disconnected your internet and said, well, I don't need to update my PC now, it's perfect, it runs fine, nothing's wrong with it, I'll disconnect it from the internet and I can now run it offline. Well, that's not going to happen because your software needs to activate and check to make sure it's like registered and licensed, and it needs an internet connection to do that. So you have to continually have your internet active if you're flying in your simulator, not only for licenses and activations, but also for live weather download reports. If you're using Active Sky and you want to fly in accurate real world weather, well, it's got to download that information from the internet. So you have to have your internet active. And if your internet's active, your PC is calling home to say, am I up to date here, guys? Have I got the most recent patch and the most recent add-on update? And if it's come back and says, well, no, you haven't actually, Windows, you need to be sent the latest update, then it'll say, cool, bring it on in. And as it's doing all this, it's taking power away from your simulator and making your simulator's performance go down. So if you'd like to know how to, and again, this is in Windows 10, other versions of Windows like 7 and below won't have this problem, but Windows 8 and 10, you will have this problem. If you'd like to learn how to disable your Windows updates, then I will go through with you right now. But one disclaimer first. Everything that I've done to my machine, I've had success with, okay? It hasn't broken it, it's still running, and it's performing great. Everyone has a different setup, everyone has a different configuration, and will be flying using a different simulator that is also configured differently. So what works for one person may not work for another, okay? So what I do to my PC may not specifically work for yours, but on the other hand, it may work as well. So the disclaimer is really that whatever you do to your PC is your responsibility and no one else's. You can't really blame other people for you doing things to your PC. Taking on other people's advice is completely up to you. I'm not saying you need to do this. I'm not saying you have to do this. I'm saying you'll get better performance, like I got better performance when I did it to my machine, okay? So with saying that, here's how. Okay, so if you're running Windows 10, I'm just going to quickly show you how you can disable the Windows Update feature from automatically starting. Every time you start your computer, Windows Update on a delayed reaction will start. So if we go to the Task Manager, which you do by going on your taskbar and right-clicking, and you go to Task Manager, and it'll bring up this, which is your Task Manager. You probably will bring it up like that, but if we go to Services and we scroll all the way down, we will see Windows Update, and you see that it's running. And if you try and stop it, it will stop for now, but when you restart your computer, it will start running again. And that's kind of annoying. It won't continually stop running. And that's basically because Windows doesn't want you to stop you updating your PC. So there are some critical updates that do need to run in order to protect your PC from viral attacks. And you stopping your Windows from updating, you're putting your computer at risk by doing so. But I'm more in the fence of, for me personally, I would rather know what exact time of the day that or the day of the week or the week of the year that I would like to run these updates, usually when I'm not in flight. So basically what I'll do is I'll prevent my Windows from updating, and then I will pick a day and I'll say, right, you just do your updates all in one day, and then I will troubleshoot to see if it's affected my sim, and then next time I go flying, I can just go flying and I don't have to worry about, oh, hang on, there's been an update throughout the night and now I can't fly. And it prevents me from flying. So I stop Windows Update, and the way you do it is under Services, where it says Windows Update, right click on that, okay, and go to Open Services, okay, and it'll bring up a new bar up here, which is your services page, okay, and you're going to scroll down again all the way down until you get to Windows Update. And you're going, even if you click stop the service here, when you restart your computer, it will have restarted again. And I'll show you why. If you right click on that again and you go to properties, you bring up a final window here on your local computer. Now, you can see here, startup type automatic with a delayed start, okay? And if you go to dependencies, it says that this service depends on the following system components for running. And as you can see, it is nothing end critical for your simulator or your PC if you stop this service. You can even, if you wanted to, create a recovery point, so you know, you're doing no harm to your computer. But one thing you must make sure is that these failures here must say take no action, okay? I think it might say restart the service or run a program or restart the computer, but you've got to have it saying take no action. You can even put a reset fail count for 31 days if you wish, but that's it. That's all you need to do on that one. On the general tab, you literally go to disabled, okay? And then you apply that, okay? Now you haven't stopped your service, by the way. The service will still be running in the task manager. All you've done is said, listen, once I stop running this, you don't start it again, okay? And now you click stop, and it will stop your service, okay? And you know, just need to click apply. So get that apply button like that, and you can apply that. Now, you've disabled your Windows from updating, and you've stopped the service from running. So you can come out of that, and you can come out of that other window. And as you see here, it says stopped. Now, when you restart your computer, that will say stopped again. If it happens to come back and say running, you just repeat them processes and repeat them steps. And now you're in charge of when your computer will do its updates. Again, with what I've just showed you, it is down to yourself to regulate your own maintenance on your computer as well, and allow your computer to update, because them updates are important. I just do it because I don't want the simulator running updates when I'm flying. Sorry, I don't want the computer running updates when I'm flying, and I don't want the computer taking power away from my simulator. Now, there are a whole host of other tweaks that you can do to the operating system. You can disable features on it. You can sort of the visual effects you can bring down in order to boost your performance. And I implore you to go and research them and act on them, because they will also help the performance of your CPU and your memory, which will then give you better performance in your simulator, okay? So do your research, because you'll have a different operating system. I use Windows 10. There'll be people out there with Windows 7, probably even people out there with Windows Vista still, Windows 8, or maybe a different version of Windows 10, like a professional version or something. But I implore you, rather than me going through every single version of Windows and how to do each tweak, go and Google, you know, tweaking your operating system for flight simulation. There are numerous websites out there that will teach you how to do and what to do to your system. My computer, I will say, was already tweaked and optimized for flight simulation by its manufacturer, who built the computer for me, which is Chill Blast. The computer was put together by Davies, so he basically specified the components that go together. And he's a well-known flight simmer in the community. This is one of his videos, in fact, and he is also a developer now in the flight simulator community. So the specifications of my computer was built by him, and then Chill Blast built the computer, and I also asked them to optimize the operating system for flight simulation. So certain things have been disabled and retweaked in order to get the best performance out. And that's one thing I implore you to go and do, is to go and find these little tweaks. It'll be different for each operating system. So this is one of the tips, one of the ways you can maintain your performance. Another way is looking after your hard drive. Now, in the last video we talked about having your sim and your operating system on one hard drive, and all your add-ons, all your planes, all your scenery on a separate hard drive, and that is so true. That will give you extra performance when you're flying as well, but it will also help you to maintain your hard drive and your PC outside of the sim. And what I mean by this is defragging, okay? Every PC's hard drive is like a wheel, like a vinyl record really, and a needle will move along the record, as it were, or the disc, and read the information, the pits, full of zeros and ones to when you look at it, but it's translated into information. So it's like a vinyl record. It plays in the grooves and translates that groove information into the sound we hear out the speakers, or in the computer's case, the visuals we see on the screen. And your information is stored in blocks on this disc. So it's kind of just randomly thrown out initially, but when it wants to access it, it has to pick up all the pieces again, and it does it using an index. It pieces it all back together like a jigsaw very quickly. We're talking like thousands of seconds, calculations a second in order to do this, and it does it very quickly in order to display whatever it is you're accessing, files, maybe a movie or a simulator that has also thousands of files inside of it. And they could be scattered, these files, all over your hard drive. Now, if you defrag your hard drive on a regular basis, because it will become fragmented, you are basically saying all them bits towards the simulator, you stay in one location, and it will be able to access the simulator files much quicker, okay? Which means every time you boot up your simulator, you're going to get better performance out of it, because it knows exactly where to go. All the pieces are still there. It doesn't have to index again and again and again. You run the defragger and analyze your hard drive and defrag it once. Now, the in-house defragger for Windows doesn't actually have the utilities that we need in order to get a successful defragmentation done on the computer. What I would really suggest using is Ultimate Defrag. This was actually designed by a developer within Mega Scenery Earth in order to, look after your PC for their products, but it is an excellent defragger. Now, every time you defrag your hard drive, you kind of, like a record, you wear it a little thinner. So the more you defrag it, the sort of more you're almost wrecking your hard drive. So I only really recommend you defrag your computer once a month if you use your sim at least 3 or 4 times a week, once every 3 months if you only use your sim twice a week, and once every 6 months if you only use your sim once a week. Defragging your hard drive will basically give your sim and your PC a big performance boost, because what you can do inside the defragger program, and I'll do a whole separate video if you guys need to know about the defrag program, but you're asking your defrag program basically to clump all the flight simulator files together in one location, index it, so therefore when it boots up again, the sim, it doesn't have to search far for all the pieces. It knows exactly where they are, and there they are, and your sim performs better. So defragging your hard drives, all of them, on a regular basis is a key to maintaining your sim and your PC performance. Another one that is really overlooked as well is cleaning of the actual computer, which I'm going to get to in a second. I just want to quickly go back to the specs of your computer. So we talked about the Windows edition, Windows 10 I run. Another thing that you want to make sure you have for your PC is your CPU is of a very fast and good make. Now, the Intel multi-core i-series, specifically i-series 7 and above, work the best with flight simulators. You want to have your CPU at a minimum of 4.5 gigahertz. Okay, so if you got a 5 gigahertz processor, you're laughing all the way. Okay, you don't need to overclock your processors. Yes, you will see an increase in performance, but there are two side effects to every time you overclock your PC. Okay, one big side effect is you reduce the life of your CPU, so it's actually going to burn out a lot faster than if you don't overclock your PC. So you don't overclock it, you don't get that performance boost, but you'll keep your CPU running for longer. Secondly, when you overclock your PC, it has to work harder. So effectively it's sweating more, which means your PC is now heating up much faster for longer, which helps to burn out quicker the CPU, but also can burn out your other components inside if you don't have adequate cooling within your computer. Now, you should only ever overclock your PC for during a flight simulator, and then that's it. You take it off, and have adequate cooling inside your PC. If you don't have adequate cooling inside your PC for overclocking, don't overclock your PC, because you're going to break your computer and burn out your CPU. I personally don't overclock my PC. I don't need to. I've got a 4.7, I believe it is, or a 4.2 gigahertz PC, and that is adequate power, okay, for the flight sim that I use. Another thing is your installed memory, okay? Back in the day, you know, memory, you would get like 1 or 2 gig that comes with your computer. Nowadays, I think you get like 4 to 8 gig that come with the computer. Flight simulators really need a minimum of 16 gig. If you're running a 32 gig or a 64 gig RAM, then you're laughing, and you're going to be able to do quite a lot of different things at once, and that's all that memory is. It doesn't mean you can do things better, it just means you can do more things at the same speed as doing one thing, you know. The more memory you have, the more calculations or the more processes you can have running on your PC. So you can have your simulator, you can have extra applications, you can have your planes and your sceneries and all this other stuff running, and you won't get a lag in performance. Obviously, the PCs nowadays are all 64 bits, so you don't even have to think about that. But your graphics card is another one, really. Your graphics card, you do want to have the best. I've got an 11 gig graphics card, the 1080 Ti NVIDIA, sorry. Oh my gosh. NVIDIA series. And it is gorgeous. It supports 4K, multi-monitors, 3D, you know, everything you'd ever want, really. If you get the latest one, the one that's just been released, you know, sometimes it might not run as smooth with the sim until a couple of updates in the future. So getting the very, very latest one sometimes can actually hinder your performance as opposed to boosting it. But that's really in a small percentage. I'd say more often than not, you're going to see an increase in performance with the latest graphics cards. Always stick with NVIDIA graphics cards with flight simulation, because they work better, and you can also use NVIDIA Inspector. Now, there are plenty of videos on NVIDIA Inspector. I'm not going to get into it right here, but one thing I will say is that this little free add-on, this little free device for your graphics card, really can tweak your sim without having to touch really the config file in boosting your sim's performance and your PC's graphical performance. And that's another thing in maintaining your PC, is tweaking your PC and tweaking your sim in order to maximize performance, but without over tweaking, because the more tweaks you apply to your config file that you add in that wasn't originally there, it'll actually slow your sim down, you know. it will actually sort of have the opposite effect. P3D especially was pretty good when it came out, sort of as its raw, config file. And you always want to keep a backup of your original config file, because if anything goes wrong, you just replace your configs and you kind of like soft reset your sim, and you can troubleshoot whatever went wrong easier than if you don't do it. So always make backups of your config files, and this goes towards maintaining your sim and your performance. Another thing as well, like I said before, is cleaning. Okay, so we talked about defragging, but making sure you don't have extra files that you don't need on your PC. I use my PC as a flight sim only, really. I have a second PC for video editing, for internet usage, and for anything else really. And the computer I have is just for flight sim. That's another way of maintaining your PC in getting the best performance out of it. And another way is cleaning it up. So much dust can accumulate inside a PC that it can actually clog it up. It's like arteries that are clogged, and then suddenly you start to slow down, and you die basically of a heart attack. And it's just the same with your PC. Dust is clogging its arteries. And one thing that people really overlook when they talking about getting performance out of their simulator or their PC is, well, opening it up and getting the vacuum there, or getting some compressed air in there and cleaning the inside to a state where it was when you first bought it. Undusting your sim, cleaning it up, will actually really improve your performance. And I recommend at least once a month you open it up, you get the vacuum out, you get the compressed air out, and you clean everywhere. Be very careful. Be very careful when you do it, because you don't want to raise any static electricity that will fry your motherboard, or you don't want to actually damage your inside when you're cleaning it. But cleaning it will really help your performance. And every year or 6 months to a year, you should actually take out your processor, take off the fan off your processor, take off your processor, give that a good clean, and re-glue your processor down, and you will see a massive increase, because dust can accumulate under the processor that you can't access with compressed air or with a vacuum. And when you clean that and re-glue it with coolant, it actually gives you a massive boost in performance of your PC, and then that has a side effect into your sim. You can get cleaning kits, you can get cleaning implements that will aid you. Go Google that. I really recommend it, but just be careful. There's a lot of cheapo ones out there that don't really do any good to your PC. So that's really about maintaining your sim and maintaining your performance. So what else are we going to be covering? Oh, all this performance and all this maintaining, by the way, it goes in helping you not have errors come up in your sim. When you're flying and suddenly it says error, and it's like, oh, where has this come from? Well, it's probably because your PC's full of dust. It's probably because something was tweaked and it's just messed it up. It's the config files as well. Minimal touching to your config files. That's it, basically. Okay, so that's maintaining. That's tips on your performance, and sorting out your computer. But what about the inside of the sim now? So we're talking about the library. Like was said in the last video, there is a certain order that everything happens in within your library. Everything should be in a particular order, and if you do have Orbex vector tool, it will actually sort that order out for you. And I implore you to go watch that other video I talked about with Orbex and Mega Scenery, because it teaches you, if you don't have the vector tool, how to properly lay out your scenery library, what order it should go in for best performance of your sim, where you won't get any errors, you won't get any black textures that appear, and you won't get any crashes to your desktop. Okay, and that's your scenery library. I'm also gonna leave this picture up here for a bit so people can understand how everything sits in. This is really how everything sits in to your sim, regardless if you're using X-Plane or P3D. So what else is there? Well, the actual settings within your sim, can enhance your performance as well. Now, there are a whole host of videos on what config settings to have within your sim. Recommend reading quite a lot of them, and watching quite a few of them and getting a collective information, because everyone's going to have different setups. Your PC is not going to be the same as mine, for instance, or the same as Jack's down the road. And so if you copy his settings or even copy his config file, you could be wrecking your sim in the process, because you might have a different monitor attached to your different PC, attached to your different controllers. And so one person's gold is another person's granite. Okay, so really, you need to experiment yourself. You need to find out what works with you and what doesn't work, and need to understand that your monitor is a major player and impact on your computer and your simulator. There's three things that really need to work in synergy, and understanding these three items will greatly improve the performance of your simulator. Your computer's graphics card and what it's capable of. Okay, your PC monitor and what it's capable of, or your TV or whatever display you're using, and your settings inside your simulator. Okay, them three things need to work in synergy before you'll get the best performance ever out of your simulator. Okay, if you've got a TV that is capable of only 30 hertz or only 60 hertz or 144 hertz or 24 hertz or whatever, then you need to understand that your frame rate inside your sim needs to be locked to your monitor as well as your graphics card. And once you do that, once they're all in sync with each other, things will be working a lot smoother. It's when you don't have your graphics card synced up with your simulator, synced up with your monitor, that's when problems happen. Okay, now I'm going to show you an example of exactly what I mean. Okay, so this is basically what I mean. I brought up my NVIDIA control panel. Okay, now I can't show you within this video, but my TV is the Samsung. It's a 4K curved ultra high definition television, and at the moment the refresh rate is locked to 30 hertz, mainly because I've locked the refresh rate on my graphics card to 30 hertz. If I put it up to 60, my refresh rate on my TV would accommodate that and change accordingly. I could even set it down to 24, which I've yet to experiment with, and it would accommodate that as well. My TV is quite an adaptable television now. Not all TVs will automatically adapt. Some will remain at a certain hertz, even though you've locked your graphics card to that resolution, that hertz, as it were. I run my graphics card at full Ultra HD definition, even though the native graphics card is this one, which is the one below it. Basically, when I hit that, okay, and click apply, as you can see, the screen goes blank. But what it does is it actually, yeah, we'll keep that. What it actually does is it locks in with that, see, it's gone back to 60 now. What it actually does is, I'll put that to 30, sorry, because that should be at 30. I'm gonna watch it go blank again, and back to 30 it should come back at now. Yes, keep that. Thank you very much. Okay, so sorry, what it does is when I kick it into 4K, I've got my TV channel on the PC configured for 4K as well, or ultra high definition. So when I activate the 4K on my control panel here, it kicks in that ultra high definition HDR for whatever it's displaying, and in our case it will be the simulator. So now I'm getting UHD, ultra high definition HDR on my simulator. Okay, so when I go to my options here, and we go to display, I make sure that I've got the top, 4K, thing ticked, as it were, here. Okay. And that matches what my graphics card says, and it also matches what my TV says. Okay. So what are we talking about? Frame rate controls. Now, the one thing I have found that by setting the frame rate here to slightly above 30 is whenever you're in your simulator, it's always jumping around. Okay, it's always throwing itself around. What I've done in NVIDIA Inspector is I've asked it to go to 30.5 in the NVIDIA Inspector, and then I've put this set to 32, and I actually find that it's so smooth. It's more smooth in the sim than it is as if I've got that set to 30. Okay. And it's really spooky, really, but getting everything in sync is very important, and that is why I have VSync switched on, because when I switch this off, my frames go all over the place. They can go as high as 80 or 50 in the sim and as low as 10, even though I've actually asked the target rate to go to 30 or 32. But when I've put a VSync on, it then aims for 30, because that's what my TV is set at, and that's what my graphics card is set at. And I've asked the sim to go to 30 using NVIDIA Inspector, but I'm asking the simulator to just go above it, because I know it ain't going to hit 32 really. It's going to hit 30 dead on, and it's going to be a constant 30. And because I'm using 4K textures or resolution, sorry, on my graphics card for my TV, I can set my texture resolution to 4K, and I can set my options for my world to use high resolution terrain textures, and that basically is going to activate the high definition or 4K textures. Now, if I'm using 4K textures, I don't need any anti-aliasing really, simply because I'm using the maximum amount of texture available, and most of the textures are in 4K, so it's not having to downscale anything. So I turn that off, and because I'm using a 4K monitor and I'm using 4K textures, that is why I put the 4K SSAA on, and I use 8 anisotropic texture filtering, because that works best for my setup. It's not like a secret, oh, it's going to work best for your setup. This is what I've experimented with when I've tried all these options. I get better frame rates and smoother graphics when I click that. I mean, maybe it's something to do because it's double the 4K texture amount, or I don't know, but it works best because I've experimented. And I really implore you to do your own experiments rather than just copying everybody, and what they do is you need to experiment with your own settings and see how things are run, which means I'm able in my terrain to have everything set to max. Now, when I used to bring this down, or when I used to pull this one down to match a certain terrain marker, or anything, I actually found that my performance went down as well with the slider. It's really weird. Having everything high for terrain gave me better performance, and it was the same with scenery objects. Now, the only thing I touch here is I have everything set to the right except for the draw distance on the autogen. I say, right, well, if I'm in a city, then I don't need it going out to the distance to where I can't see it. If I'm in the country where there's going to be less autogen to build, then that can go very high. And if I'm on an island that has got very, very little autogen, well, that can go to extremely high. But for cities, most of my flying, I set it to high because it's got a lot of buildings, and going out further means it's going to take more performance away. So I can still have the high complex scenery, as some airports will require you to have extremely dense or high scenery complexity in order to see certain objects. That's why I'm able to have all of these set high and just move this one only. I'm not going to go through everything on my options here, because it's not really, this isn't what the video is about. but I'm just quickly flicking through so you can get an idea of what I do set everything at. And that's basically it. Okay, I'm going to come out of that, and we're now going to talk about the expansions and patches for either your simulator or your add-ons within your simulator. Now, just like your PC, things need updating. Your planes will need updating. The installer. Your patches for airports might need updating. Everything's going to update at some point. Okay, you can't really get away from it. The one thing to remember is that when it does update, you need to understand that it may affect your sim, and you may need to reapply certain shaders or certain other things because it might have changed their values. And that's where I think things happen when certain add-ons update and you haven't realized it, and then you go, oh, my sim's suddenly broken. Well, that's probably because there's been an update and now it's changed your config settings. One thing I always do after every internal update of either the sim or not so much the sim, sorry, but any airport alterations, is I reinstall my P3D and my scenery config files, and that puts it back into the state it was once before. Now, it doesn't remove the update. The update is still in place, but it allows me to troubleshoot it myself, because when I restart my sim, if there is a config that was altered in the file, it will come up with an error. Now I know that that update has altered my config file. I can find out what that change is, I can understand it better and go, oh, okay, I can live with that change, or yeah, I don't really need that change and I need to troubleshoot a way to get around this error. And then you're less likely to come across problems in the future when you know what's happening to your system. When you've got that much control over your flight simulator, you can troubleshoot it fairly easy. And there's so many utilities that you can get to help you with your simulator. There's so many websites you can go to get freeware planes, to get freeware scenery, to get tools and utilities to help you fly in your sim. One word of caution with these forums and with these third-party scenery or airplane sites is that they're made by just people like you and me, people who want to develop these sceneries, who want to add something to their sim with their settings and share it with the world. Well, it may not particularly work with your sim and your settings, so be very careful what you download and what you install into your sim. You need to protect your sim at the end of the day. If it's compatible with your version of your sim that you're running, chances are it's going to be okay, but it may break your sim as well. Always back up your config files, because if anything goes wrong, you can reinstall the config files that went right, and you can troubleshoot and delete or remove the software that went wrong and not have to reinstall everything back from the beginning. That basically happened to me one day. I installed some Africa's software, and it basically completely broke my simulator. And I just didn't know how to fix it. I couldn't troubleshoot it because I didn't back up my config files or anything like that. And so I removed everything from my computer. I defragged and completely, tore apart my registry and completely sanitized my hard drive and started again with my simulator. I reinstalled P3D. That's when I started doing these videos, and I slowly started putting everything back in one at a time until I got to the current sim I've got now, bypassing that Africa software and backing up my config files wherever I could. And then if something went wrong, which it has gone in the past since I've done this, things have gone wrong and I've had to reinstall my config files, but I've been able to get past them because I have backed up my config files. And it's only the two files you need to back up, which is your scenery config file and your P3D config file, okay? They're the only two config files that you need to back up, and to keep them separate on a separate hard drive from your simulator as well. And if anything goes wrong, you just replace, you copy and paste them back in and ask to overwrite them, and then start up your sim again, and you can troubleshoot your problem. And it does really go far in maintaining your simulator. Another thing with these sites is many of them you can get extra tools that help you with your flight sim experience. You can get checklists for the planes that you fly, and you can even get the real life checklists. Some of these aircraft are so intricate that you can actually get the real checklist that the pilots use and use that within your simulator. And these are now real things that you can hold in your hand that enhance your immersion into your simulator. I make my own checklists. I'll have to do a video of them one day, and I use them whenever I fly, and they are really good, and I love them. And I put all my Cessna's ones in one folder, and I put every aircraft that I fly with in a separate one, and I use them whenever I go for a flight. And in future flights, we shall see. I'll be using the checklists, and maybe I'll do a video when I'm flying and you can see me and what I'm doing as well. Other things you can use in real life is flight planners. As well as using websites, you can actually use a print off and write in and fill out your flight planner just like a real pilot would do, and you could like pretend to submit it to yourself if you wanted to, but you could basically log your flights as well. It not only does this, like there are plenty of online applications that can do this as well, and do other things, but having them not online is kind of like a good sort of due diligence as well. In case the online version didn't work one day, you've got like a hard copy backup. And I think just knowing how many hours you've flown in any one particular aircraft is something that you'd want to know for the future. Even if it's just a 5-minute quick hop in on the sim, you log it down as if it's, you're doing it for real life. And soon over time you'll realize how many hours you actually go through on your sim. Another cool tool as well is keeping track on your fleet and how many airplanes you've got. It's so easy to install plane after plane after plane after plane, but then scrolling through all these planes is like, ugh. But knowing also, if you really want an extra immersion, Project Fly, they have a utility that controls the management of your fleet and even tells you what airport you last flew it to if you use that Project Fly in every flight you do. There are other websites you could go to, like SkyVector, and you could utilize their websites and flight planning and the maps they have available, and use the real maps as well in your flight within your sim. There's also real books you can get. One that I really recommend, which is maybe a bit outdated, you might think, which is Microsoft Flight Simulator X for Pilots, the real world training book. It's a thick beast of a book, but it covers everything. It covers turns, it covers takeoffs, it covers instrumentation, it covers airline pilot procedures. It covers a lot, and it's a real interesting and useful book to have just to flick through. As well as that, the pilots, or the private pilots license course, I've got them 5 books, and they are really great in basically learning what you'd have to learn in order to get your private pilot's license. And you can even do the test at the end of every book, and it even tells you what you need to do in order to pass for your private pilot's license. And I believe that is what it is for either the UK or the USA, but it's different in both them regions. There's even DVDs you could get as well, in order to watch and learn how to fly a particular aircraft. But then there's also YouTube, which, typing in like how to fly a 747, and it'll come up with hundreds of thousands of videos of community members teaching you how to fly a 747. There's so much help, guys, out there. There's so much help within the community on Facebook, on YouTube, on particular website forums, and even at the events that they host. They host every year one in Las Vegas, one in the UK, and many more smaller get-togethers around the world and around the countries. And I really recommend seeking one of these out in your local area, or going to the nearest one available, meeting these members of the community, all the big names are always there. People, not only the sort of YouTube big names, but also the developer big names and the brands are always there, and you can meet them and speak to them when you've got questions or you want to chat and geek out together. You know, they are really great. And there's one actually coming up in October, just which should be just before this video or just after this video comes out. So there is so much, and the main thing is have fun with your simulator. No matter what you're doing, have fun with it. I've really enjoyed going through everything, and if there's any questions, please pop them in the comments section below. And in 3 months' time, I'm going to gather all the questions and I'm going to do a Q&A for anybody who has any questions, or if you feel that I've left something out, then we can address it then. So wrapping this up now. Go fly, go have fun in your new cockpit that you've made and the new planes you've installed on the new computer you've just got, and enjoy safe in the knowledge that you are going to be having an awesome, smooth, super fun time, and I shall see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.